inside of NX, if we pull down the menu and say either export or import, if we say import and we come over here, what are these things right here? Are we importing a NX? Are we doing a direct import of V4 or V5 or Pro-E data? We actually are. NX has kind of done a backdoor hack to how does their file get set up, and they're able to import it and bring it straight into the system. Right?
Features and everything the logins.
We're going to get to that. Does it hang on to all of the part tree information and things like that? It doesn't. Does it hang on to the parameters? No, but it does. It is able to pull the geometry across. Okay. And same with export. So if you pull an export down, can you shove a NX part off to one of these other systems? Well, you can shove it off to a V4 or a V5 system. So you can do some direct transfer, either because they have the geometry kernel, or because somebody has done a backdoor direct translator to make the thing work. Today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk about the process of exchanging between CAD systems. We're going to talk a little bit about best-in-class method, and we're going to talk a little bit about how industry moves data between these systems. So, the first approach to kind of moving data is not really moving data, but remodeling the data. Okay? Second approach is using a neutral file format. Third approach that we're going to talk about is the kernel file format transfer. We're going to talk about direct translation, sort of. And we're going to talk about a direct API approach. Okay. So the remodeling. Person at company A sits down and begins building a model, gets it finished, and then what they do is they take and print out a bunch of drawings, and they send those drawings off to the other company. And if the other company wants a three-dimensional representation of that, they remodel it. Okay? So what's good and bad about that? Well, the shape on both systems, the shape of A equals the shape of B. So whatever was created here, shape-wise, you're pretty certain it's going to end up over here. Okay. The geometry is not guaranteed to be equal. Okay. How we created it with the unions and subtractions and intersections and things like that over here may not match perfectly on the other system. The history is guaranteed not to be the same. It would be impossible to try and keep that information the same. And the biggest problem is if it took you 10 hours to model it the first time, more than likely it's going to take somebody 10 hours to model it the second time. Okay? So enough said about kind of remodeling. The next thing is the neutral file format. And this list, we're going to go through kind of one by one. That list represents how you can move files in a neutral way from one system to the next. The first thing that we're going to talk about is IGS, the initial graphics exchange specification. It was developed in 1980. It was published by the National Bureau of Standards in the US. Today, there are web plugins that allow you to reach back and grab very old IGS files and open them and view them on the web. And so it does have a web presence, even though it's very dated. Okay. In 1994, the companies and people around the world, engineers around the world, kind of got together and said, you know, this is a bad standard. And the reason that it's a bad standard is because it didn't contain all of the entity types that were coming into existence. Those entity types were largely the solid geometry entity types. And so it really started in decline of its development and enhancement in the mid-90s. So this is a historical note. Okay? So when did I graduate from BYU? 1980. Went to work at Boeing. So I went to work in industry at about the same time that this became a standard. We tried at Boeing to use this standard to move data from one system to another, from a supplier to Boeing, into Boeing, from Boeing to a supplier. And if we sent simple geometry, a solid line, a circle, a dashed line, some text, a dimension, what we got on the other side of the translation was a line, so that went perfectly. Okay. This arc became hundreds of line segments, so little bitty line segments on the receiving thing. You click on it, you say erase, it'd take a little line segment out, throw it away. Click on it again, little line segment, throw it away. It was not an arc, it was lines. What do you think this became? The dashed line. Bunch of little line segments. Okay. What do you think the text was? Line segments. What do you think the dimension was? So this arrow right here consisted of two lines representing the arrow, one line going across and two more lines representing the arrow, and this number was represented with lines. That was the very first release of the IGES standard. So Boeing, did they run out and say, oh, we can use this? It was totally unusable. And so it took a number of years to get it to where it was beginning to be usable and trusted by industry. If you go to this website, the entire IGES standard is there, okay? And it's talked about in the book a little bit. And we're gonna kind of very quickly go through just the standard so you get a sense as to how complete the standard is and how it's structured. And we won't go through the standard on all of the other exchange methods, so it's just going to be this one. But the initial standard was set up so that every line in the file had to fit a punch card, because punch cards were in fashion in that day. That's how you got information into the computer, was basically through punch cards. And it had a number of different sections to the actual file format. So this is a text file that you can open up in an editor and look at. Okay. So this is now a look into the standard. The first part of the file is referred to as the start section. And all of this information that's put in here is man-readable. You could read the name of the file, you could read the person sending it to you. It was basically the preface to this file. You couldn't go past line 72. The reason you couldn't go past, column 72 is because the rest of the card, the punch card, okay, was left for line numbers. So if you dropped a huge stack of cards, you could very easily look at the right-hand column and put everything back in order. Okay? So it's just totally historical in that area. What does this actually look like? Well, here's an example, and this is taken out of your textbook. Okay? So it says, a SolidWorks IGES file used analytic representation of four surfaces. The S1 is line 1. Okay, and I just kind of retyped it so that you could read it a little easier. The second section is referred to as the global section. What do you think would be put into the global section of a file that you're sending off to somebody, without reading too carefully here? do you think is going to go in there? Would you want the units of that file to go in there? Is it inches?